Aloha everybody and welcome back to Kyle Astrology. Today I'm going to be adding another video in my series for Scorpio rising, and this one is all going to be about mostly comparing and differentiating the different Scorpio placements that you can have in your chart. And it can go for any of the planets really, but mostly it's going to be looking at having the Scorpio moon, the Scorpio sun, or the Scorpio rising. There is a lot of debate in the astrological community in general when it comes to Scorpio, because Scorpio is such an intense sign and archetype, and everyone's talking and thinking about Scorpio. But even among Scorpio people, you will have a lot of people that have their sun sign in Scorpio claim to be they're the real Scorpios, and Scorpio rising is not a real Scorpio, or you'll have Scorpio rising saying the same thing, or Scorpio moons, and it comes down to it because everyone thinks about Scorpio. And it's just that sign that everyone's talking about. There's all this mystery, there's all this depth, there's all this intrigue, and it kind of starts to get a little bit egoic, to be completely honest. And I try to stay out of that as a Scorpio rising myself, because I don't feel like any one placement is more profound than another. But I do kind of want to explore, especially comparing, this will relate to the moon sign as well, but mostly going between the Scorpio sun and the Scorpio rising. I think it's very easy for, and I don't want this to be a judgment or anyone to take this the wrong way, but for anyone that has their sun sign in Scorpio to kind of be like, oh, we're the real Scorpios, we're the elite Scorpios. And it makes sense because your sun sign is your ego. And your ego wants to identify with something. Your ego is completely about identity and how it's recognizing itself in the world. It's where the sun is shining the brightest. That's where the most light is put in your chart. And then on the flip side of that, you're going to have a Scorpio rising who they're identifying so heavily with their rising sign, because the rising sign is the self. But keep in mind there's a big difference between the self and the identity. When you identify with something, your ego is involved. The self is no identification at all, it just is. I don't know if I'm making any sense when I say that, but there's no preconceived identity having to cling on to something, because when you look at the rising sign, it's based off of your time of birth, which is changing every 2 hours on the eastern horizon. And so when you were born at so-and-so time, have Scorpio rising, whatever rising sign you have, you slid right in at that moment, and that is defining the life path that you are going to be walking your whole journey of life. Whereas your sun sign, the sun is in that sign for the entire month. So it's a little bit less personal to you. And then, we'll go ahead and look at the moon sign too. The moon is your emotions, it's the feelings. It's obviously going a lot faster than the sun, and the moon sign changes every 2.5 days. So in the moon sign, because it's dealing with feelings and emotions and kind of your inner world, I feel like a lot of lunar Scorpios they're going to feel things very intensely, and they're going to have the emotions of a Scorpio, but they're still not necessarily going to have the identity or the self of a Scorpio like the rising sign or the sun sign. And so I'm just kind of going along looking at each one and trying to show what each one represents. That the moon sign is no better, the sun sign is no better, the rising sign is no better. In my opinion, they just each represent something different in your chart. Your sun sign is no more real than your rising sign. Your rising sign is no more real than your moon sign. They are all equal, they are all valid, they just each represent something entirely different in the chart. And so I think you'll kind of have these different Scorpio people who either have the rising or the moon or their sun or different variations of it. Oh, I'm more of a real Scorpio than you because my sun's in Scorpio and your rising is just in Scorpio. And it's like, okay, come on, let's get real now. Again, everyone's gonna have their opinion and they're gonna have their own personal stance on it. But who's to say which placement is more valid than another? I myself, as a Scorpio rising, I identify with it very strongly. It's a very big part of my chart, but I'm not going to act like I'm any more real of a Scorpio than a sun sign Scorpio or a lunar Scorpio, or vice versa, that they're any more of a real Scorpio than I am. I feel like between the sun, the moon, and the rising, those are all a huge placement, and whichever one or variations you have of Scorpio in those, that's going to be huge. So I just kind of wanted to put this video out there. This isn't going to be a super long one to kind of speak on this piece, because I've had some comments come in on some of my videos recently, and I've been watching some other Scorpio type people on YouTube who have been putting videos out that I all love, by the way, but I just think that it's kind of thrown around a lot. There's some misconceptions about Scorpio and the different placements you can have with it. It's all important, it's all valid, so let's just all be, you know, Scorpio people together and have each other's backs, because whether it's the rising, the sun, the moon, Scorpio is hella intense. We go through a lot of shit in our lives. We need each other as support, and so I think on YouTube we should be coming together as a community and supporting one another, and instead of being like, ooh, I'm the real Scorpio, you're not the real Scorpio, let's come together and be like, we're all Scorpio people here. And even outside of that, if you don't have Scorpio in your sun, moon, or rising, or any of your planets, unless you have interceptions that don't have Scorpio, somewhere in your 12th house, your 12 houses where they line up and stack, you're going to have Scorpio ruling somewhere, or you have Pluto somewhere in your chart. We all have every archetype and every sign and every planet somewhere in our chart that represents the different energies and archetypes of astrology. So we all have all of the 12 signs in us somewhere in our chart. But obviously when it comes to the sun, the moon, the rising, those are going to be the most dominant ones in our chart. And Scorpio, loving to dominate and be in control, is going to have major prevalence on one of those three. And between those three, yet again, I digress, one is no important than the other. So thank you everyone for watching. I'm loving making these Scorpio series related videos, so let me know in the comments more of what y'all want to see. And if you are interested in booking a chart reading with me, check out my website down in the description box below. I'm doing chart readings at very discounted rates right now, and I will be back with more videos soon. So thank you everyone, much aloha and happy transiting.